And on this piece of real estate, our client was the tenant, and they called us up one day and said, the landlord just put a gun in my face and told me to get out, right? Told me they were done. And they're like, but we sublease this space from them. We have our license, we have our grow operation, like, what do we do? And so that felt like a Better Call Saul moment, right?
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate the various ins and outs of various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Jonathan Bench, who is a shareholder and partner over at Curtin McConkie. Jonathan, how are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me, Justin.
And I hope I'm actually saying the name of the the law firm correctly. I was just realizing, I think I'm saying it correctly, but if I'm saying it incorrectly, please let me know.
Yep, you got it.
I won't be offended if you correct me. Well, speaking of which, let's take a look at their website right now. So Curtin McConkie is a full-service law firm based out of Salt Lake City, offering legal solutions across corporate, intellectual property, litigation, and international law. They're known for their strong international practice. We're going to be talking about that a lot with Jonathan today. And the firm supports clients with cross-border transactions, regulatory compliance, and strategic growth across various industries. If you want to find them, as always, we will have a link to their website down below, but that's just Curtin, just like it looks like, Kirton, McConkie, McConkie.com, CurtinMcConkie.com. And again, we'll have a link down below in the description for their contact information. And I will give this out later in the podcast as well, but you can also reach Jonathan directly if you want to email him at jbench@kmclaw.com, which is the shortened version of their sending domain. So before we get started, however, we are going to jump over and read from our sponsors, and our first sponsor today is Groove Funnels. Entrepreneurs and dream chasers, listen up. Running an online business doesn't have to mean drowning in subscriptions or juggling a tangled tech stack. Groove Pages is now offering a limited time deal that is too good to ignore. You can get 30 days completely free and then lock in your full first year for only $2.99. That's less than what most people pay for a month of one single tool that Groove Pages replaces. You can build stunning websites with Groove Pages, launch high converting funnels, run email campaigns, manage e-commerce stores, and even start your own affiliate marketing program all in one place. No more Frankensteining tech stacks, no more monthly building chaos. Over 1 million users have already joined the movement, saving thousands of dollars and scaling faster with Groove's all-in-one powerhouse platform that replaces tools like ClickFunnels, Shopify, MailChimp, and more. There's no risk, no contract, just results. Try it free for 30 days. Pay only $2.99 for the entire first year if you love it. And again, this offer is not going to last forever, so don't miss your shot to simplify your system. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove today to start your free 30-day trial. That's theattorneypost.com/groove. And if you can't make it profitable, don't renew. It's as simple as that. Theattorneypost.com/groove. Our second sponsor is Habanero Social. What if Google could send you free clients every single month? With Habanero Social, it's not a fantasy, it's a reality. Habanero Social is an AI-powered platform that optimizes your Google business profile to attract more local customers effortlessly. From cranking out high-quality content to managing reviews and fine-tuning your local SEO, Habanero Social handles it all while you sit back and watch your business grow. 95% of search results 95% of searchers never leave page 1 of Google. And when it's a local search, 85% of those stay in the Maps pack on page 1. So that Maps pack is where you want to be if you want to capture those clients. An optimized Google business profile doesn't just show up, it engages. It builds trust, increase clicks, and ultimately boosts your business. And they're so confident that it works, they offer a 3 times ROI guarantee. If you don't make at least 3 times more than you spend with them, they'll refund your money or they'll work for free to make it right. Stop wasting time on old school tactics. Habanero Social automates everything you need to rank higher, engage better, and drive more clients to your business. If you're ready to get started, visit habanerosocial.com today and let AI do the heavy lifting risk-free. That's habanerosocial.com. All righty. And then there is, again, CurtinMcConkie.com is the website. We're going to go ahead and end this right here. My Zoom is being a little laggy today, folks. Sorry about that. And all right, so again, I am talking with Jonathan Bench. Now, Jonathan is a globally minded business attorney. He's a partner and a shareholder, again, at Kurt McConkey. And he supports companies, entrepreneurs, and funds in complex international domestic transactions. He's lived and worked in the United States, Asia, South America, and is fluent in both Chinese and Cantonese, giving him a unique edge in global deal making. Jonathan advises clients on mergers and acquisitions, foreign investments, and global supply chain strategy, often involving China or nearshoring to Latin America and Southeast Asia. He also is at the forefront of legal issues surrounding blockchain and AI, representing clients ranging from NFT studios to generative AI tool developers, and more. He's an award-winning writer and a sought-after speaker, and he's also a respected voice in both international business law and in emerging technology. His entrepreneurial background and multilingual skills make him especially valued by clients seeking practical cross-border legal guidance. And that's an awful lot to put in there, and yet I'm sure I barely even scratched the surface. So my first question to you after I say ni hao, Jonathan, is what did I miss? Who are you? Tell me about the Jonathan that people don't get to see.
It might be part of how you think about yourself. I'm mid-career now, middle age, and so I've had the benefit of working for quite a few years and looking back. And I think the more I learn, the less I feel like I know. And so I often tell people when I'm by myself at the end of the day or at a busy time where I just you sit back and relax. I'm really just a kid from a small town in Wisconsin, and so that's where I started. 10,000 people in my hometown and big family. My parents were excellent people, decently well educated, but not a lot going on in small town Southwest Wisconsin. So I really started with this idea that I was always loved adventure stories, and I could kind of imagine if I had grown up at a time when the world was a little bit simpler, would I have been one of the people to jump on a boat and go across an ocean to a new place and start? And I routinely tell myself that, yeah, that I definitely would have done that. Leaving family, leaving friends, inviting people to come along who wanted to go for the adventure. And at the end of the day, just saying, you know what, I think I need to go see what's beyond the horizon there. And so I've always had this insatiable desire to learn. And mostly it was because I just felt like I didn't know enough. So for a long time, I was just trying to figure out, how is the world put together? Why do we have this current world order? And it's probably because I didn't pay good enough attention in my history class, or I didn't take AP government in high school, where I just felt like I missed so many key points. And I'm thinking, was this a day that I was sick from school, or was I just not paying attention? And so that's kind of where I start. That's the premise of where I come from. Is I feel like no matter how much I learn, I still don't know enough, but I'm so fascinated by the way the world is put together, from geography to politics to religion to social norms. Like, all of it is so interesting to me that I never have a time where I feel like, you know what, I'm good. I'm just going to stop learning. I'm done. So I found out that's a good skill set for an international business lawyer to employ, because it keeps me active in the news. It keeps me curious about what's going on anywhere in the world, and really what the underlying factors are. And all of this feeds into the business environment.
Well, that would be that Socratic wisdom, right? Knowing that you don't know much. That's the beginning of wisdom, I would say. And Socrates would say that, Aristotle would say wonder is the beginning of wisdom. But one of the two, if not both of them, a little bit of humility and a little bit of wonder, I think go a long way. So that's awesome. Well, Jonathan, give me a pitch for your firm and specifically what you do at the firm. Who do you help? What are the main areas you focus on? Obviously, I read some in the intro, but what are the main areas you really focus on? How do people find you, and why do they choose to work with you?
I think I've only joined Kurt McConkey about 7, 8 months ago, and I've been at a couple of different firms, different areas, East Coast, Northeast, New England, and then a firm based in Seattle, and then here in Salt Lake. And so I've bounced around a lot. I've worked with great lawyers, usually at smaller firms, not at mega firms, and at least I can confidently say that between California and Chicago, there is no bigger or better international group of lawyers that you could hire. And that's me having been around the block quite a bit. It may be that between coast to coast, excluding the coast, there's no bigger group of international lawyers either that you could hire. So I'm still working on that. I'm working on the pitch. I'm trying to figure out exactly where we fit in the marketplace. Certainly in the Intermountain West, we have the biggest group of international lawyers, a lot of lawyers from top 10 law schools, top 20 law schools. And so it's an eclectic group where a lot of us are very multilingual. We've spent time living abroad, and we love international people. We love international cultures. We love the deals and situations that bring people together across borders, and we like being at the intersection of those conversations. So my clients I usually put into two big buckets, which is inbound and outbound. I represent a lot of U.S. companies that are going abroad for the first time, or that have been abroad, or think they need to go abroad, and are trying to figure out how to deal with the complexities once you get outside the U.S. And then I help a lot of international companies navigate the complexities of the US business environment, because they look at our 50 states and they know that we have different rule overlays. And so a lot of times they get mystified. They're like, do we go to Delaware? Do we go somewhere else? We know you have 50 states in the US and they all have their own legal regimes. And then you have the federal overlay. And so for foreign companies and even foreign lawyers, they get very overwhelmed by the idea of trying to figure out what happens in the U.S. and how do we make sure we don't run afoul of the regulations or laws. And they just know that the U.S. is a very litigious society as well. And those of us who are in the legal system don't stress about it so much. You know, you'll probably get sued at some point in your life, and that's once you're around enough lawyers, you just kind of get used to that idea and that someone can bring a claim against you. And so a lot of it is translating the U.S. legal system for companies. My particular practice is M&A. M&A, I say M&A, corporate finance, commercial. There's a lot of different ways to describe it. And because I've mostly grew up in smaller law firms, you take what you can get, right? That's kind of the way. The bigger the firm, the smaller the expertise. Not narrow, but like, let's say the narrower the expertise is. And so you can go narrow and deep. I grew up at firms where I had to go broad and not as deep as I wanted to. So there are certainly trade-offs, but I think that my broad experience lends itself to me being able to be more of a legal advisor in a way that helps companies think about strategy, and not just legal issues that arise, but more tell me the business. Like, my favorite thing to do when I meet clients for the first time is I want them to tell me their story. I want the story all the way from, the entrepreneur's story, or usually it's tied to an entrepreneur. So I want the story of what they built and why they built it, what they overcame, the partners they had coming in, coming out, the financiers in their lives that were good, bad, or otherwise. I want the whole story of the business. And then I know where I plug in and what exactly I can use to be useful. And often I'm just connecting people. Sometimes I don't even do legal work for them. I have people reach out to me all the time. And my main goal is to be an extremely valuable resource for these companies and these entrepreneurs, just to get them to the right person. And sometimes I'm not the right person. Sometimes they need a banker in Kazakhstan. And so I'll use my network to connect them with whatever they need. Or sometimes they have a criminal law question that they need in California, and I'll connect them to friends there. So I get a lot of satisfaction in my career out of being a connector. I probably shouldn't have gone to law school. If someone had advised me, they would have said, I don't know that you're right for law school. You should look into marketing and advertising. That's really where you should be, because you like people and you like connecting them. And so I didn't know until farther into my career that we need salespeople everywhere. We need marketers everywhere. And so even though I felt like I didn't fit the traditional law school mode, I didn't major in political science. I still found my place within the legal environment in a place where I derive great satisfaction from just being helpful to clients, even if I'm not necessarily sending them a bill for what I'm doing for them.
Yeah. Well, it leads into one of the questions I was about to ask you, and you sort of touched on this earlier too, and you just shared your perspective. But why law? What got you into what made you focus on law as opposed to other aspects? Was it just you found this was a niche, something you kind of stumbled into and realized you had an aptitude for, or did you grow up watching, I don't know, Perry Mason reruns, and you just always knew that this is where you were kind of trajectory heading for?
I think somewhere in the back of my mind, it was John Grisham. I kind of went through
There
a
you go.
phase in high school where I only read John Grisham novels. And growing up in the pre-internet days, you just had to find an author that you liked, or a magazine that you liked, or a comic book series that you liked, and then you just burned through it. And then once you got to the end of that, you had to move on to something else. We didn't have this content constantly fed to us. And
Yeah.
so I feel like John Grisham, and his books were mostly focused on the litigation system. Even so, he told the story in a way that I thought that sounded pretty interesting. My dad actually knew a lawyer in his career, and he really respected this guy. And he said, everyone should go to law school. Everyone should go there. If given the opportunity, everyone should go just to have the training, because that will be extremely valuable. So my dad kind of planted that seed in my head as well. I had a couple of brothers-in-law who went to law school before me, because I come from a big family and I'm at the end of the family. So a couple brothers-in-law that married my older sisters, and I saw what they were doing. But I tell people I really just ran out of options and time, and part of it was because I ran. I went to I started out in English literature, and then I pivoted to Chinese. And somewhere along the way, I missed the conversation with the career advisors who said, as a non-native Chinese speaker, you can't make a career out of using your Chinese. You need another skill set. But I got to the end of my undergraduate program, and I figured this out on my own, where I thought, I don't have a marketable skill at this point. I made it through my whole undergraduate career, and yeah, I'm smart, I guess, and I'm scrappy, and I know how to work hard, but I really don't have a marketable skill that I could put on a resume and say, look, this is why you should hire me. So that was part of it. And so I knew I needed a graduate degree. I didn't think I had the attention to be able to focus on one problem for 6 or 7 or 8 years and do a PhD program. And so law was 3 years. I didn't know any entrepreneurs at the time, or I probably would have gone into business and gone some maybe strategy or something like that. And so I tell people, if you look at my resume, the way I arranged my resume, it looks like I made every decision at the right point in time, when in reality, I made all the decisions in the reverse order. And I just kind of ended up with the skill set that I have now. I learned Chinese first, and then I went to law school. And when I was in law school, I figured out I want to be a business lawyer, but I know nothing about business. Well, what's the solution? I guess I got to get an MBA. So I added an MBA in the middle of law school.
Because
So
why not?
yeah, because why not? And law school was horrible, and I hated most of it. And business school was really hard, but it was really fun. And so I was able to have that contrasting experience to really give me a view for what business people look at, how they think, how they talk, what's important to them. And so that was an extremely good training. I tell people it was the best decision I made in law school, was to put the legal studies on hold for a year and a half and do my MBA and then finish up at the law school, because that gave me an extremely wide skill. It just broadened my skill set quite a bit, where I'm the lawyer that's not afraid of financial statements. I'm not afraid of spreadsheets. I actually enjoy statistics. I like knowing how numbers drive decision making. And I didn't have any handle for that until I went to my MBA program and started having to do it in real life.
Gotcha. You'd mentioned John Grisham before, so here's a very important question. I need you to take this absolutely seriously. Who's your favorite fictional attorney?
Favorite fictional attorney? I'm not really in the fictional fan world of attorneys. I think because I live it. I have people who suggest it all the time. They said, what's the show with the oh man, I don't remember this one. It's of course it's set in New York like everyone. It might have been was it Suits? It might have been Suits. Anyway, I watched a couple episodes, and I'm like, yeah, I like this, but I'm kind of living it every day. And so I go to my media to escape. I don't go
That's
to my
fair.
media to engage more with my career that I'm already working a lot in. But Saul from Better Call Saul.
Oh yeah,
I mean, he's
I like him a lot actually.
absolutely hilarious. All the tropes, but also there's some reality there in terms of trade-offs you make as a lawyer between client development and you're like, well, is this a moral decision for me at this point, or is it not? So I like wrestling with those questions, because I don't think I have on my bio, but I've done a lot of work in the cannabis industry, which has been very, very interesting place to play, especially when I was up in Seattle. So, and for me, at times it was a moral decision. I was like, am I working for drug dealers, or am I not working for drug dealers? And so I've wrestled with some interesting questions along the way, as I've picked up clients and as I've marketed my business, and I've tried to follow emerging market trends, from cannabis to blockchain to AI, and tried to follow what's happening next and why it's interesting. So that's, but yeah, I guess Saul, he's absolutely fantastic.
Well, I'll give a free plug for that show as well. I've only started, I'm about 4 seasons in. I have not watched the whole thing, but it was recommended by multiple attorneys, friends of mine. And I'd never seen Breaking Bad either. So I was like, all right, I'll sit down and watch this. I watched Breaking Bad, and here's what I'll say. This has nothing to do with any of our conversation, but I had a friend of mine who's a deacon in our church, and he says, I've never seen a better movie, a better show that encapsulated the phrase "the wages of sin is death." Because if you watch the whole movie by the end, I mean, it's bleak by the end. And I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So he's like, but once you watch that, watch Better Call Saul. And I will say, that's the weirdest show ever because it's half like legal drama slash personal relationship, half like mob and mafia stuff. And there's like three or four series or threads all going on at the same time that are almost unrelated, but still a little related. It's a fascinating show. No spoilers. I've not finished it yet, but like, so far I'd be willing to give it a thumbs up, and I've liked what I've seen. So if you guys shout out in the comments below if you like Better Call Saul, and let me know your thoughts on it. But no spoilers in the comments. Um, so okay, I'm gonna ask another just kind of a off the wall question here, but English lit. Who's your favorite author?
Oh, great question. My go-to novel that I listen to, because I'm in the phase of my life where I have to listen when I'm, listen to books when I'm doing laundry or
Laundry, dishes.
cleaning the house or driving around. So my all-time favorite novel is The Count of Monte Cristo, which is
Okay.
amazing because it's an English translation of an original French work.
Yeah.
But the translation, I got to imagine the French is off the charts great, because the English translation is that good. And it is about 40, 45 hours maybe end to
Hmm.
end on the audiobook. But I love I love the relationship. I mean, the best, this coming out of literature studies, right? The best stories, you put you put your protagonist in a hole and they have to get out. Then you put them in another hole and they have to get out. Like that's how you write a good story. And so he, Edmond Dantes starts in, yeah, he's in this amazing life, everything's going, and then boom, he's in the darkest hole that he can be in. And then he meets a friend in Abbe Faria, and they have these amazing exchanges, and he learns. And I guess I see parallels in my own life where you kind of figure out how ignorant you are at some point in your life, and then you think, well, what am I going to do to solve for that? And so he had this amazing relationship where he was locked in the dungeon, and then Abe Faria makes the tunnel. They meet up, and then Abe Faria spends, I think in the book, I think it's over a decade. They spend over a decade together, and he just teaches him everything he knows, and they have this beautiful relationship together. And that's my favorite part of the book, and then of the story. And then you go on to later where he's exacting revenge from everyone who ever wronged him. And in the written work, it is complex. There's probably 15 main characters and then a whole network of 20 to 30 sub characters, all woven together in this masterful way. And I think Andre Dumas wrote this toward the end of his life, and you can tell that he just is so good at weaving together the characters. So that one is my all-time favorite. I probably listen to it once every year, every other year. And it's something that I can just pick up and put on anytime as well. And I can pick up where the story is. But I do love the whole story arc as well. I'm big, if you can't tell, I'm big on story narratives. I think everybody's got an interesting story, even if they don't think they have an interesting story. And so I do that with people I meet, with businesses I learn about, and great works of art.
That's awesome. One of the reasons I have the podcast, people like who wants to hear about attorneys, but I have so many attorneys have so many fascinating stories. Sometimes they're just off the wall, they're weird, they're bizarre, but everyone has the story to tell. And I absolutely agree. Now, I don't know if I've ever read the unabridged version, I'll be honest. I remember reading it in high school, but I think our copy was like that thick, and there's no
Right.
way that was the real one. I think the real one's like, like
It would
it's
have
a
to be,
it's
yeah,
a small phone book.
800 plus pages, I bet. Yeah.
But it was one of my favorite books I read at the time. I didn't realize it was the abridged version at the time, but yeah, I absolutely loved it. So that's a good choice. I like that a lot.
And
Um,
now I pivoted to Brandon Sanderson now. He lives in Utah. He's from Utah. He's, I think, by a number of books, he might be the number one fantasy author in the world. And
mhm.
so, and that's been a way for me to bond with my boys because they started reading his works first and then got me into it. And I was very intimidated by the size of the books. And I think his longest book in audio form is over 65 hours, I think. So
Oh
some of
wow.
these are incredibly huge. But he does the same kind of thing that Andre Dumas did, which is write stories together. And his stories actually all mostly feed together in different ways. But he has a lot of major and minor characters, weaves them together very well. Amazing story plot twist that you wouldn't expect. And so he does this over and over again in his books. So the fact that he's a Utah author, big bonus, but I'm also a big fan of fantasy and of just well-crafted stories.
What is his best book? Because in about a week, I'm going to be sitting on the beach in Delaware for 4 or 5 days. And I mean, I've got 5 kids, so I'm sure I'll be busy with them a lot. But I'm going to have some downtime to read. And I'm always looking for something good to read. So if you were to recommend a Brandon Sanderson novel, what would you
Yes, start
recommend?
with the Mistborn trilogy. If you're okay with
Okay.
3 books, and these are not crazy long, the first Mistborn trilogy is an amazing place to start.
If
If you
nothing
want
else, I'll throw it on my Audible queue.
Right, exactly. And if you want a good standalone novel to get a flavor for it, it's called Elantris. That's Elantris. That's just a standalone novel, gives you really good flavor for his character development, his plot twists, all of the things, his attention to detail is very, very fun. And that actually was based in in every one of his sets of novels. He develops a new novel, a new world, a new setting, a new magic system. So it doesn't get old because he's always coming up with different ways that that magic could work in a given place. So really a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well, I will throw that into my Audible queue. This podcast sponsored by Audible. Not really, but I should get them to sponsor because we syndicate to Audible. I should definitely get a deal with them too. My goodness. That's awesome. Well, if nothing else, I got a great I got a great recommendation for something to read. I'm actually excited about that because that sounds like my style of novel. So
Yeah.
it's been a while since I've had a good one to kind of just dive into. So that's awesome. So let's talk about you in law though, because that is what we're here to talk about. Now, you've been practicing for a while. And I said this in the pre-roll as well, but I'm a firm believer that you go up to bat enough, nobody bats 1,000. And I'm sure in your experience of law, you've had a number of setbacks or failures, but every failure is just a slow burn win as long as you learn from it. So I almost called you Brandon because I was looking at Brandon Harrison.
That's
So
all right.
Jonathan, if I were to ask you, what's one moment in your legal career that you would consider to be a failure, but what did you learn from it, and how do you carry that forward to always make sure you're giving the best care to your clients?
Yeah, I'll give you 2 examples because lawyers can't just give you one example. So the first example is early in my career, I went, I tell people I went to law school not knowing the 3 branches of government. I could only name 2 of the 3 branches of government when I started law school, which is deplorable but true. So I don't want to varnish that. Um, but I graduated from law school and started my job not knowing the difference between an LLC and a corporation. And for most people, that's, you'd say, well, they're kind of the same thing. And as a business lawyer, I can tell you, yeah, they are kind of the same thing, but also drastically different in some ways. So though that's kind of the lead up to when I started with in Maine at a great firm with a really fantastic partner. He handed me a project, and it was a purchase agreement of some kind. And he told me he wanted me to create a closing agenda for the deal. I didn't really understand what that meant. I kind of rooted around, found what I thought would work. I sent it to him. I didn't understand that what I needed to do was read the whole purchase agreement and then take all of the data points out of there, all of the deliverables, all of the closing contingencies, and put that into an agenda, which is like AB1, ABCD, 2, ABCD. These are all of the things, the prerequisites to closing, some of the due diligence we need to do. So I didn't know that I needed to tee that up for him or what he really expected. I wasn't smart enough to go back and say, George, I don't really know what I'm doing here. I need some more guidance. So I was very bad at going back. I was just kind of like, in Midwest style, it probably just takes more work, right? I just need to put in more work. And so I would kind of go back and just beat my head against the wall, trying to figure out what I was missing. When in reality, reaching out, asking a question, kind of having some humility and saying, kind of knowing when it's okay to say, I don't know. That's a valuable thing for a lawyer skill, but also especially for young lawyers to know is just when it's okay to say, I don't know, I don't understand this, to not feel like you're a failure or somehow you don't belong in the chair where you are. I think a lot of us have imposter syndrome from time to time. And so even now in my career, I'll look around and think, I'm not sure I belong in this room. Am I really the best person to be doing what I'm doing here? So a little moment of candor for you there, where I just, and I think it's probably how most of us are, at least with those of us who have healthy egos, but also hopefully a little healthy dose of humility along the way, trying to
Yeah.
figure out if you're even the right person for the conversation that you're in, or if you should be in the room where you're supposed to be. So that's so that's kind of early stage career. I'm just thinking I wasn't smart enough to tell clients when I didn't know the answer. I wasn't smart enough to tell partners or admit to them that I needed help, and I didn't even really know how to ask for help very well. Fast forward when you get to be partner level, there's a lot of client management that goes on. And it's very hard sometimes to know, if you're not busy enough, you're either at least in my world, you're either too busy or not busy enough. And so when you're in the not busy enough phase and you're responsible for paying your own bills and keeping other people employed, sometimes you'll say yes to projects that you probably shouldn't, or you say yes without putting enough contingencies on the scope of engagement or on how you'll get paid or when you'll get paid. And so I've been burned plenty of times by scoping projects the wrong way, by representing clients that I probably shouldn't have because they just weren't good people. And I've had some instances like that where I kind of look back and regret the way it went down. Ultimately, I almost always lose money based on what I build to them. That's kind of that kind of puts an exclamation point at the end of it. It's kind of like, well, what did you learn from a moral/human development standpoint? And then also you lost money because you didn't manage this client well enough, and they turned out to be a skunk and left you, owing you tens of thousands of dollars. So those are very interesting. I think all of us who are in the entrepreneurial phase, we all have to deal with that. How you scope your work, how you put your price tag on it. And I remember a friend who's in sales telling me over and over again that your goal is not to reduce the cost of your services. Your goal is to prove the cost of your services. And so keeping that in mind and kind of holding the line, which is why it's nice to be in the too busy phase of life, which is where I am now, where I don't have to say yes to everyone. And I don't have to agree to take someone on with a smaller advance fee. If I think they're going to be a flight risk or something, then I'll ask for a bigger advance fee. And I'm more comfortable kind of saying, okay, I've worked through all the money you gave me. Now I'm ready to get more money from you, or I'm just ready to sit on your project until you're ready to pay me. And that's a hard conversation to have. That's a different skill set. It's hard to have hard conversations with people and still feel like you can look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day.
I agree with that 100%. And I've had to be in those exact shoes before. So, and there is a real benefit to when you get so busy, you can just throw out a random price that's way higher than you would normally throw out just because you're like, I don't really need this work. But if you really want it, then sure, here's my new
Right,
price.
right, right.
So I get that. I really like what you said before about the earlier on. There's a really weird overlap I find between what's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is when people don't know much and think that they're experts, and then imposter syndrome, where the more you know, the more you're like, I don't know anything. I can't teach any of this. I'm not qualified to talk about anything. And there's this really weird transition that people who get educated go through, where I think everyone shifts from Dunning-Kruger, where you're like, I learned something. I watched a YouTube video. I'm an expert on this, right? We all, I think, are at least uh, tempted by that sometimes. But of course, the real goal is to obviously move past that. But then you shift over to where the more you know, the more you realize there's so many holes in your knowledge. Like everyone and their mother would know more about this than I knew, because there's so many things I just don't know about. And then realizing, no, that authentic humility is not seeing yourself as greater than you are, but also not seeing yourself as less than you are. And I think
Right.
that it's hard to learn that skill, but it's definitely a very valuable skill.
And every once in a
So
while, I end up in a room where I look around and I'm like, okay, we're talking about tokenization of blockchain assets. And I look around and I'm thinking, all right, well, I might not be the most technical person in the room, but I'm the only lawyer in the room. And I know quite a bit on the technical side too. And so I'll be on a panel or speaking at a conference and I'll think, why did I get invited to speak on this topic? There's surely, I know at least 10 people who could deliver on this topic better than I could. But maybe they're not available. But also sometimes I look around and I think, wow, I guess I do know more about this topic than anybody else in the room. And that's it's good when you get to that point too, where you just kind of realize, all right, it's part of that pendulum swinging back and forth between the imposter syndrome, sometimes thinking that you're at the top of your game, and then others, at least you're like, well, at least I belong here. At least it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a mistake that I have the mic right now.
No, 100%. Absolutely. Well, the flip side of the failure coin is, of course, successes. I'm sure you've had some great moments in your career that you're particularly proud of, maybe early on, maybe later in life, maybe right now, maybe last week. What's one or two of the things you've done, Jonathan, that you're most proud of in your legal career?
It's hard because I actually have a lot of satisfaction out of helping mom and pop. Like I really do. Jenny, I think it's my Midwest roots and my small town roots. I honestly love helping people. Like I actually have two deals right now that are going on that are going to close within weeks of each other. One is what I would call a mom and pop trucking company. It's small market cap, it's privately owned. family-owned business for generations. They're getting ready to transition out of family ownership into, to a key employee, and it's been great. I derive a lot of satisfaction out of making sure that this one experience they have with an M&A lawyer with an M&A experience, how many people buy and sell or build and sell businesses throughout their lives, even serial entrepreneurs, maybe 4 or 5. And
Mhm.
so a lot of people, at this point in my career, I've been through hundreds of those. And so I know how to prep them. I know how to talk them off the ledge. I know how to help them prepare. Oh, by the way, if the SBA is involved in this deal, you think you're going to close in 30 days, it's going to take 90 days to close, to help them set their expectations the right way. And honestly, just translating complex legal terms or complex business arrangements down to simple, digestible portions, which I tell people as a simple-minded person, it really helps. That's how I think. And so then I can translate it to people who aren't lawyers. So I have to understand things in very small portions in order to honestly, in order to write them into contracts, but also just to feel like I have a good handle and I can map it in my brain the right way. So mom and pop shop, love helping them. Absolutely fun. Their dollars spend the same as the big companies, but I do derive a lot of satisfaction out of helping them. The other one is, as a deal lawyer, sometimes we look at just the dollar amount of the transactions that we're working on to see if our career is progressing. So I'm currently working on a massive international merger that is probably 10 times the value of any deal that I've ever done before.
Wow.
And it involves AI, which is super cool. So this scope of working with, me being here, I've got a buyer, seller in Asia, I've got a buyer in the Middle East, and I'm in the middle because it's a Delaware-based transaction. So that is a pretty good feather in my cap. I'm still living it right now. It's not all glamour and glory, but from certain metric point of view, it's quite a big feather in my cap to have at this point in my career. And I'm thrilled that it's international. I'm thrilled that it's high tech, and that it was my client and my contacts and my business development efforts that brought the work to me. So that's all a lot of satisfaction, I think. I haven't had a chance to really reflect on it too much at this point because I'm still in the middle of the chaos and working insanely long hours to get the merger agreement turned back and forth so we can close this month. Um, but it's been extremely satisfying to see the progress and where deals where I would have kind of freaked out. Someone had given me an 80-page merger agreement with over 100 pages with exhibits. When I got it, I wasn't happy about it because I knew it was going to be an extremely long slog. And the deeper I got into it, the worse it got because there are 20 pages of definitions that you've got to have multiple screens just to keep track of what's going on. And what does profit mean here? And what does loss mean here? And how do we deal with this earnout? And how many classes of shares do they even have in this deal that are going to be swapped back and forth? Like it was nightmarish from so many aspects. But back to the Midwest roots of just rolling up your sleeves and digging in and doing the work. There's no substitute for that either. And so I'm super thrilled that my parents instilled that respect for work. I don't know if I love work. I don't know if any of us really love work, but we love what we get out of work, and we love the sense of accomplishment we get from really putting in a good day's work, whether it's a good day of physical labor or a good day of intellectual labor.
Awesome. No, that makes perfect sense. And yeah, no, I get so. Sorry, I was about to ask three different questions, and it's one of those things where you chase two rabbits and you miss both of them. I can't remember what I was going to say, and it was
That's all right.
it's on the tip of my
I'm
tongue.
sure it
Anyway,
was profound.
I'm sure it was the most profound thing I've ever said, and I just lost it. So that's life, right? Well,
Yeah.
let me ask you this. Speaking of profound, let's go to the opposite of profound. Let's go to absurd. I find that attorneys have wonderful absurd experiences. You deal with clients with weird expectations. You deal with rules that people never thought through the way it was going to shape out in reality. And especially when you deal with international law, I'm sure you deal with some of the most absurd situations. And of course, I love absurdity because it also makes for really great podcast fodder. So, what is one or two of the most absurd things you've encountered in your practice of law, Jonathan?
I'm often it centers around the people that I end up representing, kind of the scope of the deal, the people I represent. So my weirdest clients, and this actually was one of my worst clients also. So this ties it back to some of our regret stories. Some Russian nationals who had some real estate in Bali, Indonesia, who had decided they were going to dive into blockchain development. And then the weird tie-in is that they were doing some very cool stuff, but just the most bizarre thing of kind of having the time of day we'd have the calls, they're on the call, chain smoking, endlessly, every call. And I had never worked for Russians before. And that, just the whole scope of the international aspect of it, that they were Russians in Indonesia, that I didn't know this necessarily the source of funds. I didn't really trust them. And everyone who I talked to said, you got to make sure you get paid up front because you're only getting paid once. They're not going to pay you twice. And so just some really interesting, what I consider cultural dynamics of global business. And I know that you can't generalize all the time, but we have to generalize sometimes because it helps us make sense of the world. And so I'm not even saying all Russians or most Russians are bad, but these Russians were particularly interesting. And so just those interactions, and the way that they wanted to manage me as if I was one of their tech developers instead of one of their lawyers. And so when I got to the point where I'm kind of sitting back and trying to figure out how the relationship went wrong, that was super interesting, just to get a feel for, oh, this is probably partly culturally based, but partly it's tech culture and not just general business culture either. So there was kind of like the double lines of disrespect that I'd been forced to walk in dealing with this client. And so I mean, just interesting, really along the way. I have a bonus story for you as well. There was a client in Seattle area, and there was a landlord and a tenant, and they both had licensed cannabis businesses. I think they were both doing grow operations around Seattle, and the interesting thing about the cannabis industry is you have this wild mix, even still, of guerrilla growers, people who have been growing pot in their backyard or basement since the 70s, and then you have this influx of Wall Street money and sophistication, and then you have everything in between. So you have these two bookends of what you could find in the industry at any given point in time, and on this piece of real estate, our client was the tenant, and they called us up one day and said, the landlord just put a gun in my face and told me to get out, right? Told me they were done. And they're like, but we subleased this space from them. We have our license, we have our grow operation, like, what do we do? And so that felt like a Better Call Saul moment, right? Where we're looking and thinking, I'm still a pretty young attorney at that point in time, and certainly not used to dealing with this. Usually people I work with are very level-headed, and we're just doing business. Where firearms and potentially someone's on illegal substances, beyond cannabis. It was an unexpected call, and certainly an unexpected journey to get our client to where they were more comfortable with the situation. But I mean, it was wild stuff.
That's awesome. One of the best stories I ever heard. One of the attorneys I interviewed one time had a judge pull a gun on them in court.
Oh, wow.
And it's a bizarre situation. I don't even remember how it all played out anymore, but I mean, that's up there. I mean, your client's not you, but even still, like that is crazy when you're dealing with so many different factors all going on at the same time. Well, let's talk more about your area of expertise while I still have you. I want to be respectful of your time. If you have a hard out, please let me know. But I want to talk a little bit more just about you and your experience of the law. You've worked in Asia, you worked in South America, you've worked in the US. First off, where's your favorite place in the world to visit? That's an important question, right?
Great
But
question.
tell me about a moment in your international career that really surprised you or shifted the way that you view cross-border deals.
So my favorite places in the world always have something to do with either the mountains or great food. And so it depends on where I am, what I'm going there for. When I was, even before law school, when I was living in China, I had some of the best food that I didn't expect this at all. I was in Sichuan province. The best food was in the school cafeteria where I was teaching English. Absolutely, hands down. I'd been to five-star restaurants in that province. I'd been to a lot of different places, but the best food was made by some student's grandpa or uncle or aunt in the school cafeteria. As I just walked through and pointed out, I want those vegetables together with that meat. And I didn't know enough Chinese at the time to tell them how to cook it. I just just put that together, and they would take it back, and I could watch them cook in these giant woks that you could fit a grown human in probably. And they're cooking, fire everywhere, and the smells are just unreal because in Sichuan, that's one of the pinnacle of Chinese cuisine. And so that experience, if I could go back to that time in a heartbeat, if I could have that guy making my dinner every night, some amazing Sichuan food as grandpa made it, That's, that I tie that to the memory of why I want to go back to China every time for the great authentic food. I have these same kind of fantasies about eating it's real Italian food on the coast of Italy on the Mediterranean that I haven't done yet, but that's on my bucket list. So kind of geographic based because I love being in the mountains, and then also food based because I still love eating. Those are kind of interesting things about where I've been. From a business standpoint, though, I find the cultural aspects are always fascinating, and because you have cultural aspects in every deal of what time is early, what time's too early to get up, what time is too late, when how do they respect holidays? Are local holidays a big thing or are they not? What's the relationship between workers and management? What do they think about foreign influence in their country, and how does that factor into how you can do business there? So there are so many issues that are tied up, cultural issues that are tied up in the business issues. Even the way that certain cultural issues are coded into language, and you find that as you get deeper into language study. Why do they use a certain word to describe this the way what we would describe in English? So very fun to deal with all those nuances. At the end of the day, the most surprising thing for me is how each culture does business and how they think about business. It's just a matter of is it a respected position? What kind of positions are respected more than others? What kind of careers are respected more than others? And it's just, I guess it's a big anthropological study in the back of my head about how business gets done and what's the right way to do business somewhere and what's the wrong way to do business. And often the boisterous kind of hard-hitting American way that works so well here in the U.S. and gives you so much respect and so much clout can really derail a transaction. And you have to kind of sit back and think, what are the cultural intangible? In my world, I always think about tangible assets and intangible assets. And so I think, what are the intangible aspects of the way this deal is going down that we can modify a bit to get everybody a little more comfortable with each other, to get past the nuances of the relationship, to get past some skeletons in the closet in the due diligence that came up that we need to get past. All of those things matter. And ultimately, it's kind of like, how does each culture determine how you convey respect to someone else? Because at the end of the day, entrepreneurs and business people, they've been working hard their whole lives. They want to be respected at the end of the day. And often it's an intangible deliverable, right? It's something that it doesn't necessarily mean, it doesn't translate into the purchase price necessarily, but it does translate into the way that you are doing business with them. And it can be, an offhand comment can derail a transaction just as easy as something more significant.
That makes sense. You've done a lot of work with blockchain and AI. You've already talked about it a little bit on this podcast. What was one of the earliest moments when you realized there's something to this? This isn't just hype. This is going to reshape entire industries. And at what point did you buy your first crypto? What was the price of Bitcoin when you first bought in?
I wish I had bought in 2015. Yeah, I don't think I bought my first crypto until about 2022. And that was really when I got in. So I've been in crypto industry probably for 3 to 4 years now, pretty deep. And I owe it to a great mentor, 100%. He was a lawyer who I respect, a China lawyer, and he had pivoted into other things. And he had gone to a conference in Portugal, and he came back and told me, Jonathan, you need to look at this. You need to look at crypto. It's really phenomenal, and you're going to love the international aspect of it, but it's going to be a bit of a slog to get into it. And so that started my 6-month journey down the YouTube training of what is blockchain and what are the different facets of it, and how does the technology work, and how much is cryptography involved in it, and who's doing what, all of that. So that was about a 6-month journey before I even felt semi-competent to be able to put myself out there a bit and say, I think I understand the business aspects of this industry enough that I can represent companies who are participating in the ecosystem in different ways. AI was a different thing because I'd already done the blockchain dive, and AI wasn't too far behind that. And I was watching this, kind of wringing my hands, thinking, I backed the wrong horse, because I understood blockchain. I know how it can be widely applied for very good uses. But at the same time, when I saw what AI was doing, I thought, this is changing every industry. That's not fair. because I wanted to be able to focus on one thing at a time and get really good at that. And all of a sudden AI came in, and now I've got to understand. I knew what AI was doing, but also how it's changing everybody's point of view and how it's changing the pace of business. And so that was fun. And so I kind of dragged my feet on the AI because I thought, well, I don't think I have time to get up to speed on AI the same way I did with blockchain. And that was partially true, but AI is in some respects a lot simpler technology to understand. Maybe not on the large language model building and training side, but on the practical application side for all of us. And so I was able to get up to speed a lot faster in AI than I was in blockchain. And it probably was due to that extra time I spent on blockchain and diving into the aspect of technology. And I've just loved technology. So kind of looking myself in the mirror again and saying, hey, guess what, buddy? You're an international lawyer, but you're also an international tech lawyer, and you're an international finance lawyer. And so what are you backing down from? Like, just dig in and learn it and do it. And so like, once again, growing up at a small firm where you do everything, you kind of have this uncertainty. You don't know what kind of lawyer you are, other than I'm kind of a business lawyer. Whereas if I had gone to a big firm out of law school, I would say, well, I'm a venture capital funds lawyer. And that would be what I was from day one. And that would be where I ended up in my career. Whereas now I can put on a lot of different hats. And so it's hard sometimes when people ask me what I do, when I say I've sold and bought dumpster businesses and AI companies and everything in between. And that can be a little atypical because I've done that domestically and I've done that in for clients around the world too. So it's kind of hard to distill it down into just a few things. But at the end of the day, yeah, I love international business. I love international people. I love interesting projects. And so anytime I can get in on something interesting, and I can usually always find something interesting in every deal, I'm engaged and I'm super thrilled to be involved in it. I always learn something, and I meet really interesting people.
That's awesome. Let's talk more about AI for a minute because I'm always fascinated by this, and my listeners have seen me go down this rabbit hole repeatedly, so I'm not going to force them to watch the same video over and over again. One of my favorite videos is the video from 2023, and when Sora first came out and they could make video. They said, let's do a video of Will Smith eating spaghetti. And it was like the weirdest monstrosity you've ever seen. You could tell it was
I
Will
love
Smith.
those. I love
You
those videos.
spaghetti, but it was a it was very beyond uncanny valley. And then about a year and a half later, they did it again, and now it's almost spot on. There's still little weird idiosyncrasies. At one point, he's like inhaling the spaghetti like a vacuum cleaner, but that's 1 year's worth of change.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're suggesting by the end of next year, if not by the end of this year, which is where I think it's going to be, 90 to 95% of all content online will be AI generated. So for someone like me, I'm in a content creating business. We do
Yeah.
marketing, we do all this stuff. AI plays a big role in what I do on a day-to-day basis. But you look at it from a very different perspective. You're looking at it from the perspective of a businessman, from an attorney, and from an international perspective. Where is AI going? Do you think? What are going to be the big shifts that AR is going to force down upon us in the near future, outside of Skynet or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting thing. One of the first videos I ever watched on AI was Andrew Yang at Stanford, I believe, talking
Mhm.
about how consequential AI would be. And his statement that he said AI is not just, it's not like difference between 1990 and 1999. It's not do you have broadband internet? Do you have access to the internet? It's not that. It is more consequential. It is, do you have electricity or do you not have electricity? And that has stuck with me over the last couple of years as I've been watching and talking to people and traveling around the world and seeing the disparity between third world countries or emerging economies and developed economies, where I see such that divide is going to get extremely huge. And it will probably cripple a lot of nations that can't keep up, that really can't do it, which is going to be hard. I mean, I think of the U.S. as stewards. We need to be stewards over the assets and the resources we have. And we have the capital, we have the technology, we have competitors, of course, around the world. China's a prominent one. EU is trying to catch up as well. And so AI, it's the accelerant, it's the accelerator for everything. But if you can't even plug in, if you don't have broadband internet, if you don't have access to education resources, then that's going to be an ever widening divide for quite a while. So I think in terms, so like you kind of have to look at it, what's it doing to developing nations and what's it doing to developed nations. And I thought you were going to ask me about whether I'm scared, whether am I scared because we're everybody, what are you scared about in the rolling out of AI? And from a content production standpoint, because I'm also like you, I'm kind of in the content production business. I produce content so that people kind of get a feel for how I work and maybe they decide they want to work with me. And I use it to network as well with my friends who are around the world. So there's some aspect of that too, where AI, I guess AI prompted by me could produce content that I would produce normally, but I don't think that AI prompted by you would necessarily be able to replicate what I can do. And so I think that the fact that we all had to dive into AI simultaneously in our developed nations, and we all got hit at the same time with this kind of extreme uphill trajectory of how quickly can you adapt. And there's still a lot of people that are using it to do mundane things, whereas others who are early adopters of tech have been using it for months and years to really get ahead and continue to get ahead. And I found that early adopters of technology just continue to adopt early technology and do really well with it. So, but this is it's very consequential. I mean, it is, I can't think, I'm not a sci-fi guy. Outside of space travel, I don't know what else could be so consequential for us for the next 50 years. I just don't know. Maybe limitless energy. If we tap into that, that would be something because that would fuel things in a different way. But this access to information, aggregation, I use ChatGPT today, the conversation mode, to practice my Chinese. I don't need a tutor. I don't need a live tutor. It will help me when I go to China and I can talk to people, but there's a lot that I can do just with this enterprise subscription and the voice interaction, and I can practice and tell it to slow down and repeat for me. And I don't understand that. And how's my pronunciation? And is this the right term? I mean, it's amazing, right? All of the things. It's kind of the way that the iPhone or the smartphone came and said, look, now I've put all this whole database and wealth of apps at your fingertips, and AI has done that now with an even more ability to personalize. So I'm super bullish on it from a productivity standpoint. Lots of other ways we could look at it, but I think people who are ignoring it or who are kind of marginalizing it, to their own risk, I guess.
Yeah. Scott Adams, the Dilbert guy,
Yeah.
who apparently is suffering from cancer and maybe dying this summer, unfortunately.
Mm,
But he's
that's
pointed out
sad.
repeatedly, I think is really fascinating. He says, for the longest time, getting nations on board with, I mean, you mentioned limited energy, we're not there yet, but nuclear, right? Getting people on board with nuclear, everyone was so touchy and we don't want to touch nuclear. Everyone was like, oh, it could be bad for the environment. And he's like, then AI came in. And the thing about AI is those data centers need power. They need more
Yeah.
power than we can produce. Like we are at a deficit already, and we're going to be at a greater deficit. He's like, all of a sudden, all the pathways for nuclear have been completely thrown wide. Like nobody's. I mean, they care about regulation, obviously, but they're like all of a sudden everyone is looking at nuclear again in the most serious way because everyone sees this being one of the big bottlenecks coming forward. Is you're not going to be able to adapt and grow with AI in the way you need to if you don't have enough energy and enough resources. So I think we're seeing all around the world, people are kind of coming online with nuclear again, which I'm excited about. I've always been a nuclear fan. Obviously, I know that there's risks, but the modern nuclear plants are good. Also, I read something 15, 20 years ago on thorium nuclear reactors, which apparently it's a thorium fluoride ion or whatever. It's the size, you could have a facility the size of a house, and thorium
Uh-huh.
is so non radioactive that you can carry it around in your pocket.
Oh,
And the
wow.
like the half-life of the byproducts of this reaction, they can be stored in a drum like 10 feet underground, and nobody would be at risk from any of the harm. And obviously, you wouldn't do that, but I mean, I think we're going to see some real shifts in power technology, whether we get to fusion or fission or anything like that in the near future. I don't know, but I do see that coming down the pipeline, and I think that AI is driving that incidentally, right?
Right.
So I'm intrigued to see where that goes. I know that the current President Trump, is really big, very bullish on energy in general, and I think that energy really is going to be like the energy economy is going to be huge coming down the pipeline. So I guess this will dovetail into what will probably one of my final questions, because again, I don't want to take your whole afternoon up. But what do you see future AI, crypto? What is the future of global business? What are the big shifts that are coming down the pipeline? What's going to throw you off? What's going to make you have to change directions, or where are you already moving in order to help your clients? And what is everything going to look like in 5 years, and in 15 years, and in 25 years?
Yeah, I think the most interesting aspect, and this is something that I kind of pushed off in my learning phase as well, is how important India is and is going to be in the next many decades. India, and I'm using India, U.S., China as the three poles, because right now it's just U.S. and China, and India is a major player, but kind of in a not in a chest thumping kind of way.
Mhm.
And India, India has done a lot of business with Russia. India does business with kind of whoever they need to. And India kind of represents the expediency of emerging nations. And India is really not an emerging nation anymore. It's quite developed. But if you look at Africa as well, with the exception of a few countries, a billion people in China, billion people in India, billion people in Africa. Africa is a little harder to tie in because it's such a massive place, and the infrastructure is wildly different. So India next, Africa after that, in terms of development. But I see India's decision making. Kind of the allies. I see everything through the geopolitical lens of U.S. China. U.S. helping China emerge, and then China all along, under the Chinese government, not really playing ball or intending to play ball the way that we thought they would, and kind of the way that that's emerged over the last 20 years, 25 years since China joined the WTO with the U.S.'s support, by the way, because we thought we would be able to change the way that China does business, the way China operates as a country, if we brought it more into the Western realm. So it's been super interesting. India is a genuine democracy, though. And so, with a billion people, the world's largest democracy, I am really excited to see how that changes. And I think that India will be in a lot of conversations. There's a lot of investment going on from India. Indian companies are successful and are buying up established brands that we've knew and grew up with. Your big European car brands, other industries. And so that's been super interesting for me to kind of dive in deeper, talk to my Indian lawyer friends about what they're seeing, and understand more about India's development trajectory. And that's been really interesting, and kind of where I'm sitting and wrestling with right now, as probably something that I'll focus on for the next 10 years, which hurts me a bit in my heart because I spent so much time on China. I started learning Chinese in 2001. And so I'm well past the 20-year mark of time that I spent. I learned two Chinese dialects. I love Chinese people. I love the cuisine. It's just hard at this point in my career where I was kind of 10 years too late to ride the China wave and go in there and make money hand over fist like a lot of people did. And now we're at a much more kind of stable but weirdly stable spot in China, where their development is flattened off, their pace of growth is flattened off, their economic prospects are not as good as we thought 10 years ago. So it's just interesting to see what will happen. And of course, India and China have their own shared border where they've had issues. And but like I said, the expediency that kind of I see India's governance and plans as a matter of great expediency, but they do understand the value of a U.S. alliance. And so I'm looking at all of this, that the global security, economic security, political, national security, all of the things factoring into how easy is it to do business across borders, which we know can change. We lived through COVID, so we know how quickly that can change at any given point in time. But I'm ultimately bullish. I like I like people. I think everyone wants to live a good life. I think they generally want to help each other. Even we like it when helping ourselves helps others. And so I'm always trying to find those win-win-win situations where that rising tide will lift all the boats together. And I'm optimistic. I think that the interpersonal connections are the most important connections we can make, and that I didn't come up with this statement, but this idea that when our governments don't get along, we can still get along, and we can smooth over individual interactions, can smooth over political foibles or political scruples. And that's really the only thing that's where the bedrock needs to be. So kind of my look at what I think is how important it's going to be to continue to to keep up our interpersonal interactions, no matter how the world gets fractured.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So do you have ChatGPT teaching you Hindi as well, or is
Not
that
yet. It's time factor. We haven't figured out how to. That would be a consequential invention, right? If we could go into a matrix like scenario and just upload things to our brain, now that would be killer.
that would be awesome? Well, we're almost to the point where you're going to have Douglas Adams used to have his joke in The Hitchhiker's Guide, the babble fish, right? You put a little fish in your ear and it would translate, but we're there functionally at this point.
Yeah.
It almost makes it, I don't want to say obsolete to learn new languages because I think really knowing the language is important because it helps you pick up on certain cultural cues you might not pick up on. Oh, they use this word, not that word. And there's a
Right.
reason for that, that if you're just getting a translation, you would never, ever really get that. But we're also at the point where that may be a lot less necessary in the near future too, which is fascinating. I do a lot of PR work for a lot of my clients, and for a while we were doing campaigns, news stories and stuff in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. I speak English and bad English, as the joke goes, right? I mean, I was in graduate school, so I've taken Latin, I've taken French, I've taken German, I've taken Japanese for 3 years. Don't remember a lick of any of them. I can insult your mother and suggest that we drink some coffee together, but outside of that, that's really all I can know.
Important conversation starters. Yeah.
I mean, they are the two most important things to know, that and where's the bathroom, right?
Right.
Then you're good to go. Kohi o nomimasho ka, something like that. Anyway, I just lost my train of thought again because I'm just being silly here. I guess I had three different points. Dang it, I did it again. I've been talking all day today. So it's one of those things where if I just let my brain keep going, it goes. So one of the things I was going to ask you about actually this, and I meant to, this is one of the things I was going to ask about earlier, because you mentioned COVID. What was your experience of COVID dealing with international business arrangements, right? I mean, I talked to a lot of attorneys and they're here, they run a family law practice in Sheboygan or whatever.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that's fine. That's great. And they're going to have a unique experience. Some law, the courthouse was shut down. They had to do hearings or depositions via Zoom or something like that. It's interesting to hear their take, but you're dealing with it on a totally different level because you're dealing with totally different, national organizations. How did you stay abreast of that? How did you know what the changes were? How did you guide your clients through the pandemic?
It was really hard. And honestly, the hardest thing is whenever you hit a big global shock like that, the public capital markets dry up, the funds, all the investment funds hold on to their money. The angel investors hold on to their money. And so it part of it is that it's that uncertainty where suddenly people are like, well, I don't think I'm ready to put my capital at risk now. And that can go across a lot of different industries. So that was very interesting. I think the most shocking thing was trying to track what was happening to China, what was the real news coming out of China. And we were all caught flat-footed in seeing how quickly those ports in China got shut down. And then how the line of the quintessential line of shipping containers, shipping container ships, whatever they're called. There's a real term for that. Lined up outside the port of LA for miles, just waiting to offload their goods. And then what it meant, we all had to get really familiar with terms like demurrage, and other kinds of fees. We're like, I've never been an import-export lawyer to this extent, but now I've got to figure it out. Same way we've had to do with tariffs this year, where suddenly I was okay being in the background doing things, and now I've got clients, and we have so much volume of work dealing with what's the next change of the tariff? How does this happen? How do we mitigate tariffs? And we all have to learn new vocabulary to figure out what that means.
But your Scrabble game is on point.
Absolutely, that's right. As long as you have enough letters on your slide. So that was extremely interesting and frustrating for everyone. The way that one of the funniest things is my friends who are in the shipping industry, how they said, well, we finally became the most sexy of all people to talk to. And they'd never had that happen in their careers before. So interesting shocks to business, and everyone. I mean, the ultimate takeaway was, which is driven now by the Trump administration and had been getting pushed along the way for quite a few years, even before COVID, is how we need to not have supply chain. We can't let China have absolute control of all the supply chain inputs. Like, we can't have all supply chains run through China. It doesn't work. It's not good for anybody. Even for China, it didn't work because the same way they shut down and suddenly they can't do business either. So the way that we kind of realized, yes, this supply chain integration and specialization in localizing in China in certain quadrants or certain clusters, is extremely good and helpful, but we can't only have that. We need to continue to replicate this in other parts of the world too.
No, I agree with that 100%. It's fascinating because that feels like such a basic piece of knowledge, right? Diversification. We do that everywhere.
That's right.
So
That's right.
your portfolio should be diversified. You own stock, own a diversity of stocks. You own crypto, own a diversity of crypto. You invest in some real estate, invest in a fair amount of real estate, right? So if any one of them tanks, you're okay. But for
Yeah.
some reason, with the supply chain, we're just like, China's got it, we're fine. That never sat well with me. So I was glad to see those changes coming down the pipeline since the first Trump presidency. I keep politics out of this show. You're free to be as political as you want to be, but I try to call balls and strikes just as fair as you can. I think that those are good decisions, and I support those decisions. So,
I'm a
well,
lawyer, so I take in all the data. I'm like, just give me more data. Don't be afraid. Dump all the data on me, and then we can make predictions and let's see how it plays out. And then let's be honest about the results. Like
yeah.
that's where I sit. I don't like whitewashing. I want the hard, cold facts. I want people to talk straight, and I think we'll all be better for it.
Oh, I agree. I also just like the way he says China.
China.
China. Well, Jonathan, I appreciate your time with me today. I don't want to take up your whole afternoon. So here in a minute, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you my three closing questions. I'll give them to you right now so you can percolate on. We'll jump over and take a look at your site again. Question number one is, if I gave you my magic wand, and with this magic wand, you can change one thing as a shareholder and partner at Curtin McConkie, what would you change about your firm? Anything you can think about. Number two, you go back in time, meet young Jonathan, and you can give him some advice other than buy Bitcoin at 2015 prices. What advice are you going to give yourself and why? And number three, if I gave you my magic pen, now this pen comes from DC Drug, which is a drugstore run in Donovan, Kansas by a good friend of mine. I have multiple friends that are drug dealers because that's just how we roll out here. Actual pharmaceutical drug dealers, though,
Right.
obviously.
Right.
But I don't know. This must have spilled in some sort of a pharmaceutical, and it has this miraculous power where it can change laws. So if I were to loan you my DC drug pen, and you could strike one law from the books, add a new law to the books, or edit a law that's on the books, and for you this might be really difficult because of course you're looking at local U.S. laws, but also international laws. What one change would you make and why? While you percolate on that, we're going to jump over as we did before and take a look at your site. Again, I'm talking to Jonathan Bench, who is a shareholder and partner over at Curtin McConkie. Their website is curtinmcconkie.com. As always, we will have a link in the description down below. We may also put Jonathan's email down there if he wants us to do that. But if you have a question, if you have an issue in business law, it's particularly international business law, one of the largest firms out there, while we were talking, I did a really brief scan. I saw at least 176 attorneys, I think, on the website. I don't know if that's the current number or not, but
That's pretty close.
It's a good amount of attorneys regardless. So one of the biggest law firms out there specializing in this area. So if you've got an issue, they would be a great resource for you. So again, we'll put all of their information down below. Really quickly, we're going to jump over and read from our final sponsor. That sponsor is Rank with News. If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications on a regular basis, brands like Yahoo News, Bloomberg, Reuters, Forbes, AP News, and others, and see those articles ranking online in Google, in AI, sometimes in under 8 hours for major competitive keywords that you wanted to rank for and that people were actually searching for, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page one in under 2 weeks, safely, organically, and usually permanently. It's like guaranteed SEO or search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business or firm, visit Rank with News or rankwith.news, rankwithnews.com, in order to book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or your business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can launch you to page one in a matter of hours and help you dominate the local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers and clients with rankwithnews.com. All right, so Jonathan, I have a magic wand here. I don't actually have it with me. I left it with the last attorney, but when I get it back, I'll loan it to you. And with that magic wand, you can make one change to what's going on right now at Curtin McConkie. So what change would you make to the firm in its current incarnation?
I would make it so every partner and associate has a personal development plan, which would be comprehensive. So they would have to go through business goals, but also personal goals, and not necessarily personal goals tied to career. I would like some accountability internally for that, for myself, but also for others. I'm very concerned, as I guess all middle management does. We get concerned with younger lawyers. I want to make sure that, but I really want to make sure everyone feels fulfilled in their career. I want to make sure they're they enjoy what they're doing. It's work, yes, but I think if we can make it so people really enjoy at least some aspects of their work, that will help us avoid burnout, and it will make people more excited to come into the office, to interact with each other, and to continue to do what we're doing. And I think that will generate money for people, which I think is why people go to work, of course. But I also think that aspect is extremely important to make sure that everybody thinks and is forced to think about it and evaluate how am I doing.
That's good. That's a good answer. Okay, we travel back in time. I don't know what year it is, but we see young Jonathan, maybe fresh out of law school, and you're able to go over without breaking the space-time continuum and just, whisper a couple of sentences of advice into your ear. Other again, the aforementioned obvious answer. What advice would you give yourself?
Uh, Keep learning. Don't be afraid of learning. Don't feel like you've ever learned enough, and don't uh, don't throw away any relationships. Everybody you meet is valuable because of what you can give them, what they can give you, and your quality of life will correspond directly to the quality of your network around you.
That's good advice for really for everybody. So absolutely. They say you're the average of your five closest friends, but also just your general network, right? The better your network is, the better off you wind up being. So I would agree with that 100%. Okay, magical pin, the magical pin of drugs from donophandrugs.com. Free shout out to donophandrug.com. But I have this magical pin and I loan it to you. You can make one change, Jonathan. There's not much ink left, so you can really only make probably one change. What change are you going to make and why?
I'm going to make it easier for companies to raise micro amounts of money without going through too many major hoops. So maybe we create a separate class of accredited investor, or it's a semi-accredited investor, or even a non-accredited investor, and we make it easier for people to be responsible with their money without a ton of government oversight. We'd have to implement some changes, of course, but I would like to make it easier. I would like to make it easier for people to raise money from friends and family without worrying that they're breaking securities laws.
That's a good answer. I've always found it, and I understand that, at least I understand that there are reasons for the laws that are there, even if you don't fully understand the reasons for the laws. But yeah, it always feels kind of unfair to me. But again, there's always something about the government saying what you can and can't do with what's yours anyway that always feels weird to me. I get why it's there, but sometimes it doesn't sit well with me either. So
Yeah.
I think a good suggestion. Well, Jonathan, thank you very much again for meeting with me today. I do always like to let my guests have the final word. Are there any last words of wisdom, parting thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Um, no, I think it's been great. Been great to get to know you. I think this has been valuable time for both of us, even just like you said, expanding the network. I think that lawyers, if you have someone in your life who's thinking about law school, you should encourage them to do it. People say we have too many lawyers in the U.S., but that's really not true. We probably have too many not great lawyers, but I'm okay with that too because I think we need lawyers who can serve all different types of clients. And so I was worried for a while that we wouldn't have job security, but back to the thing that the lawyer who my dad knew said. Legal training is fantastic. It really is. You don't have to go to law school to learn to think like a lawyer. Some people are just genuinely great at thinking. They're just great thinkers. Some of us need to go to law school to learn how to think better, more clearly. And so, if you have someone in your life who is considering law school or even considering a career in business law, you should encourage them to do it. It is very fulfilling and it's so broad. And law schools really don't translate that very well. You kind of have to get through law school to figure it out, and it's really a tragedy that way. But I'm extremely fulfilled in my career in the type of work I do, and I think it would appeal to a lot of people if they could understand what lawyers that are not in courtrooms do on day-to-day basis.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. I feel the same way about philosophy in general. I have my degrees in philosophy and history, which I always joke means I can ask the deep questions in life, like paper or plastic, or you want fries with that. But it trains you how to think, and thinking makes you better at anything else that you do.
Absolutely.
So I'm a firm believer, and a lot of people that study philosophy go into law school anyway. So
And they
that was a
ki- and
very
they clean my clock in the philosophy majors and the political science majors clean my clock in law school.
I was almost a political science major. I had my minor, but I realized it was training me to be like a local city governor or whatever. And it's like, this is not what I want to be. I don't want to be a
Yeah.
city manager. So I kind of tossed them to the side. So, well, Jonathan, again, thank you very much for talking with me today. This has been The Attorney Post. I am, as always, your host, Justin West. I've been chatting international law, AI, all sorts of crazy things with Jonathan Bench, who again is a partner and shareholder out at Curtin McConkie, the law firm based out in Salt Lake City. As always, though we do deal with a lot of different legal issues on this podcast does not constitute legal advice. And if you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter that you need help with. Now, obviously, if you're out in Salt Lake City or even just international and you need someone that specializes in this kind of law, I think Jonathan would be a wonderful resource for you and his firm. That's J Bench, J as in Jonathan, Bench as in his last name, Bench, at kmclaw.com. Please feel free to reach out to him. Let him know you found him on the podcast if you do, because we always like to see that as well. As far as the podcast goes, if you're listening to this on any of the major podcast repositories like Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Audible, etc., please like us, subscribe, review, rate, whatever it is. On YouTube, obviously, subscribe, share, leave a comment down below. But the most important thing you can actually do with this podcast is this. If you know someone who would benefit from the knowledge that was talked about in this podcast, share it with them. Help them to know and get a better footing for what the legal realm looks like and what their rights are. Because as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. And that's why we do this podcast. Until next time, I'm your host, Justin West. Thank you guys for listening and have a great one.